Welcome to the Septic Shock road trip. Whew, and I'm certainly tired, Ron, because I drove that last leg from Vermont, and we've now pulled over at the side of the road and put up our set. This is a set you're looking at. The cynical among you may think that we're not actually driving across the United States, but we are. And then we erect this set just for the recordings.
Right.
Here we are in.
Thanks for driving while I took a nap.
No worries, Ron. Here we are in Massachusetts.
Yeah, here we are.
For our two-part Massachusetts show. This is part 1, and this is our Italians Go to Boston episode.
Right.
And we're talking 2 Italian horror productions that were shot in and around Boston, I guess. First up to the plate is 1981's The House by the Cemetery, as directed by Lucio Fulci, who has a small cameo in the film. And first time watch, Ron?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So this one has Paolo Malco as a sort of, he's a university professor of some, there's going to be a lot of vagueness in this plot description.
Yeah.
And he has to, him and his wife, as played by Katrina McCall, have to go from their apartment in New York with their slightly curious looking little boy to Massachusetts to do something or other, to research something. I'm entirely sure. And the people who had the house before, he killed someone and hung himself or something like that. Meanwhile, there's a little girl who seems to be psychic, and she's kind of trying to warn the little boy at first in a like a photograph in their house in New York, and then he turns up and she's warning him, don't go to the house. It's kind of Shining adjacent, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of Fulci's take on The Shining via H.P. Lovecraft, I suppose. And but they do go to the house, wouldn't you know it? And a babysitter turns up.
Yeah, randomly. I don't know where she came from, or
and gory murders happen. A bat attacks. Paolo Malco finds a tape recording, and then turns out there's a zombie in the basement, the Dr. Freudstein. And then there's a and how am I doing? It's quite.
I wish you did this for every movie we review. This is like the perfect summary.
But that's kind of it now. But however, and I'm sensing Ron might have a different take on this to me. But
you missed the random like tombstone that takes up the entire living room floor.
In the living room, yeah. Which doesn't have a tomb under it, right? It just leads to the basement.
No, it just leads to the basement. Yeah. And then they're like, isn't it strange that there's a tomb in the basement? And it's like, nah, people used to do that all the time. The floors, because the ground's hard.
Yeah, which I don't think is true. I think they made that up. But but you might think from my plot synopsis that I don't or didn't like this film. I actually like this film a great deal. I don't know what Ross thinks about it, but well, why don't we find out what Ron thinks about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I enjoyed it quite a lot. I thought there was a lot of like fun stuff in it. It was like it started off quite strong too. There's a lot of really good ideas, a lot of good images. It's really quite creepy. You know, it does its job quite well. but yeah, I have no idea what happened in this movie. It was like, I finished. I was like, I do not understand the story of this movie at all. I don't know mythologies or the logic behind anything that was happening, but there was a lot of really cool images and ideas. Basically, I think.
I'm glad because I wasn't sure because I'm a long time fan of this film and the director Lucio Fulci.
Oh, this is your how many times? You've seen this before?
Oh yeah, several times. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
I used to have a very high, I still have a pretty, like you said, the the Italian horror film or gore film of this era, which this kind of belongs to. Yeah, their strong suits are the set pieces kind of above all else in a way, right? Like it kind of gets you through all the other stuff. Like,
right.
You know, it's not a boring watch, and just as you're getting a bit confused, a gore scene will come along or something, and oh, that's quite strong or quite gory or nasty or.
Right.
Like, there's lots of nice ideas, like when the little boy is trapped in the basement and the father's like putting his axe through the door and it's almost hitting him in the head, and you know, it's quite well mounted, really. It's quite well done, and got a very, you know, typical loud kind of very. The soundtrack does a lot of the work as well, right? It's got,
right. Yeah.
It all looks great.
Yeah.
It all looks nice and photographed very colorful and vibrant and stuff like that. But yeah, just doesn't make a lick of sense.
But yeah, I mean, I got the impression that it was sort of like, and actually it has a lot in common with the other movie that we're going to talk about today too, is that it just like, they have these sort of ideas of really cool horror scenes or horror images, or really, let's do this. And then we're like, well, what about the story? It doesn't matter. Let's just string it together and it'll be really cool to watch, right? So, and you kind of almost forgive it for not making any sense whatsoever, just because it's like, hey, that's cool. Oh, there's another cool thing. Oh, there's another cool thing, right? So,
well, I'm glad that worked, because I know I am aware that as we've mentioned before, one of your Achilles' heels is you don't necessarily like to be confused or something, to be ambiguous or senseless. But it seems as if you didn't give a shit in this case. Like you just kind of.
Yeah, I don't think you're meant to give a shit in this case. I think in other movies, it's sort of like when you're confused, it's sort of like a hey, you're confused. I'm not going to tell you the reason, right? This one is sort of like like it's almost like the director's saying like, don't worry about it, just watch the movie. You know what I mean? Just enjoy.
We didn't film the scene where it's lunchtime, let's go, you know.
And you're like, well, Mr. Fulci, what about it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Just a bunch of the acts think the boy's ahead.
Apologies to any Italians watching.
My neighbor's Italian, I apologize.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. He can hear you through the walls. It's
yeah.
I'm making fun of him.
But yeah, but there's a lot of fun stuff in this movie. I think it's just it's a fun watch, but it's completely nonsensical.
Well, like straight from the beginning, there's like that you know, the couple in the house, and there's the kid with his brains spilling out, his scalp split open, brains running down the front of his head, and
right.
And you know, yeah, good, nice, gloopy kind of, you know, visceral.
Yeah,
which they linger on as well, like and linger, don't they?
There's a couple of sort of I guess 80s horror movie, I guess special effects tropes. I guess you would say that I noticed a lot in this one and the other movie, which is that nobody ever raises their hands to protect themselves. You know this? Anytime, you know, there's like you get a stab, you can see a little bit of like the discoloration of like where they put the fake skin or the blood pack or whatever it is. And they never go, It's always like, keep your hands to your side while we stab you in this neck, right? You never, no, don't do it. But like, it's always like their hands have been glued to their sides, right? It was like, no one ever like tries to stop the knife with their hands, right? So
move around too much because the squib or whatever might.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell it's because they've been told, don't move your hands because otherwise it'll come out or something, right? So I found it very novel.
Yeah, you know, and also I quite like, even though the ending is kind of I don't really understand. I quite like there's a bit of a fairy tale kind of mix going on in here as well, right? A bit of a kind of dreamlike kind of logic. If there's any logic, it's a kind of dream logic, isn't it? Like, so yeah, I agree with you. It has a kind of it's propulsive, right? It never stops long enough for you to really kind of think too much about it.
Yeah.
And it's got good set pieces, and yeah, it's kind of fun. For me as well, the thing about this, so this was one of the films that ended up on the notorious Video Nasties list back in the
Which
day.
is what?
Where if we talked a while ago about, so basically this was when, in the very early days of home video, because there was no censorship at first, like there would have been at the cinema. So video stores were flooded with all sorts of things that you never would have got at the cinema, including a lot of these kind of cheaper, gorier horror films from around the world. And there was no, there was no 18 certificate, 15 certificate. So there was this immediate clampdown, and a lot of films were out and out banned. So, and over the years, they would have been re-released, but with cuts and stuff. And we had fairly strict rules in the UK from about 83 until maybe the late 90s, which is why if you meet anyone kind of my demographic, a little bit older, a little bit younger, who grew up in the UK, who's a horror fan, we're very evangelical about censorship, and also we all share in common this obsession with a raft of movies from mostly the 70s and 80s that, sometimes are worth the time of day, but we would have obsessed for years and years and years over these films just because we wanted to see them in their uncut form. Whereas I think if they'd have been left alone, and people wouldn't remember a lot of these.
Right.
I don't think this falls into that camp. I think The House by the Cemetery, like we talked about, is a fun film, and the director Lucio Fulci made this, and he made other classics like Zombie Flesh Eaters and The Beyond and City of the Living Dead and New York Ripper, and we'll probably talk a few more of his films at some point, either on this or our other show.
Right.
But yeah, so it's got that going for it as well, is it belongs to this, exclusive club of, notorious films, which mean nothing outside that demographic, but for us, it's one of the, so I would have seen this originally on a bootleg VHS, and it would have been technically illegal for me to have been watching it.
Oh, lock him up.
Yeah, so it's got that extra frisson of, doing.
Oh yeah.
So, I remember
something naughty.
It probably would have been, I think, with The House by the Cemetery, I think it would have been a VHS bootleg of a Japanese laser disc, maybe.
Oh.
That's where you would have got the uncut stuff back in the day. So, someone would smuggle in one laser disc, and then you'd have nth generation copies. And, fun.
So, I have a question about it, and I'm going to get to more questions about this sort of overarching kind of ideas with these two movies. But what language were they speaking?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of a bit like
because sometimes the dubbing, it was obviously all dubbed, right? It was all post dubbed, but I couldn't. Sometimes what their mouths were moving actually matched what they were saying.
Yeah.
And sometimes it didn't.
Yeah. So basically, the way it worked in Italy for decades was they didn't bother with on-set sound. So there's lots of stories about American actors, for instance, going over to Italy to film stuff, and being slightly nonplussed and confused because, on a Hollywood set, for example, actors are acting, whereas apparently on an Italian film set, even if you were working for, like a great director, it's all right, move closer to go over there, talk to, you'd be getting on-set direction as you were
in the middle of the scene.
So they would have post-dubbed almost everything. So I don't think there is a definitive original. So Katrina McCall certainly would have been speaking English because she was British. I don't know if she spoke.
Right.
Paolo Malco might have spoke English as well, so they might have mostly spoken English on set. But maybe some of the other actors didn't. They were just Italian. They would have spoken Italian. So they would have, like a Saigon, they would have just spoke whatever, and everything would have been post-dubbed either in English or Italy. Interestingly, in Japan, most of these films I've tracked down on VHS back in the day, they seem to have released the English dub here. Normally, in Italy, we got the English dub. Plus, a lot of these films, not this one, but a lot of them would have disguised their Italian origins to be more because people wanted American movies, right? So, you know, the directors would have changed their names. They would have changed, you know, he wouldn't have been Lucio Fulci, he would have been Louis Fuller or something like that. And they would have changed the actors' names. And no, I don't think in the case of House with the Septic, but that was very common. So I think the default export version would have often been the English dub.
Right.
I don't think there would really be a definitive.
So my question is: this was shot and filmed and set in Massachusetts, in Boston. Well, but was it actually was it when it was originally released? Was it in Italian?
Well, just to correct you there, I think some of the interiors were shot in a studio in like Rome.
Okay.
But you mean when it was released in Italy?
Because I see the original title is Che la via canto al cimitero, right?
Yeah.
So this is actually an Italian movie. It's not an American movie.
No, it's an Italian movie, and it would have been released in Italy under that title, and it would have had an Italian dub.
Okay, so the original would be in Italian.
Well, they would have prepared all the dubs at the same time.
Oh, okay. So it's not like it's not like originally in Italian and then they dubbed it into. It's like they're just doing it all simultaneously, all the different languages that they're releasing in.
Yeah, exactly.
At the same time. So that's why it doesn't matter what language the actors are speaking, because they just really. So it's like a publishing a book and you just translate it to many different languages at the same time.
So that's why occasionally you notice that the dialogue matches the lips, because it will be someone speaking in English saying the lines. So obviously they would have had a guide script and they would have had, you know, but yeah, they could be. So for instance, sometimes the English, you know, usually in terms of, you know, foreign films, film fans tend to prefer the original language with subtitles. Whereas, but in the terms of these films, there is no definitive. And
there is no original language. Okay.
On the film, so for instance, there's a Western called The Big Gun Down, starring Lee Van Cleef, and the Blu-ray version of that they've released recently in its full uncut version is in the Italian dub. So fans have actually gone back to an older English dub because they want to hear Lee Van Cleef's voice. If you see,
right, yeah.
Do it for them.
So would Leo Fulci himself be overseeing all of the different dubs?
I'm not sure, actually. That's kind of a good
question. Because that's the idea behind people wanting to see the original language, right? Because that's the one that the director was in charge of, right? And that's why the dubs are usually considered not as good, because you know the director had nothing to do with those dub recordings, right? So
I'm guessing they probably would have been farmed out to. He might have overseen the Italian one. I don't know, but I doubt it. I think it just would have been, you know, done with other groups, whoever. I think they were primarily concerned with what the film looked like and, you know, the soundtrack.
Right.
Sure.
Right. And was this like a specific genre of film that was like an internationally dubbed film kind of idea that they were making, or was this specific to an Italian film? Or
I think I think it depends on but certainly in Italy they would have filmed like this for decades, 50s through to the 80s. They would have done this not on sets, and that would have been the default. And then there are other countries that do it, but don't necessarily have that international. So a lot of Hong Kong films, the on-set sound is rare, but I suppose in some of their cases as well, they did prepare, for instance, English dubs of like kung fu films and stuff, and also you had a Canto dub and a Mandarin dub. but I get the feeling with those that there does tend to be a definitive. Actually, no. Often is the case, because sometimes when they were doing old school kung fu as well, they would have been recording it in Mandarin. Yeah. So there's actually a few different film markets around the world where they have a very different concept of, I suppose, the importance of this. Obviously, the Hollywood and American way of doing things, it seems to be of primary importance to have on-set sound, right?
Right. And so, is there any particular reason why both these movies were filmed in Massachusetts? Like, why not just do it in Italy?
I guess, like I said, at that time, everyone, American movies sell, right? Like, so many of the movies tried to pass themselves off in general as American, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of people at the time as well, they would have seen them in either theaters or on video. I'm not sure if they they probably figured out this dubbing is a bit strange, but I'm not sure how many people other than film fans would have gone to the trouble of finding out, where these films were made, or I think they just would have accepted, oh, this film's, rattles along, it's got some good gore, I've had a good time tonight, that's it.
Yeah. I didn't, because when we started watching the movie, when I started watching the movie, I didn't realize this whole kind of Italian background of this. I just thought it was just an American movie shot in Boston. Right. And I noticed that, like, wow, there's a lot of Italian names in these credits. And I was like, what's happening there? And then I noticed that that the dubbing was strange, but sometimes it actually matched their mouths. And I was like, what? So I didn't, and then sometimes it didn't. So I was very confused by the background of why this seems to be an Italian movie, but it's not an Italian movie, but it's set in America. But some of the Americans are speaking English, actually speaking English. But yeah, it was a bit of a head scratch for me. So
I think if you made a film in 1981 in which a family moved from, I don't know, Rome to rural Italy, and pretty much the same thing played out, I don't think that necessarily would have been marketable around the world.
I see.
Wanted American films, right?
Right. So would the English-speaking actors dub their own lines in English?
Case by case, I think. Like,
did Catriona MacColl?
No, not sure. I haven't had a chance to listen back to the commentaries, because I think she's. They might mention that in the commentary tracks. Some did, and then some actors, they spoke English. They did the most famous one, I suppose, is Franco Nero, the original Django. He did all, because he speaks English very well, he did all his own English dubbing for all his films, I think, or most of them. And then I guess it depends whether the actor gave a shit or not, more than. So some people did, some people didn't. Like, the more of these films you watch, you recognize certain voices. Like
right. There was like a troupe of voice dubbing actors that would always do all of them, right?
The same as you start to notice the same voices again and again in kung fu films from a certain
right.
And I guess as well, if you really want to go down that route, some of those people even have, fans and fan sites and people who have identified them.
Right.
They're almost more famous than the actor.
And the actor itself, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Okay. Anyway, thanks for the background. I was like the movie was kind of a fun watch, even though it was sort of didn't make any sense. But I was really curious about like how this movie came to be, about like the background, why it's Italian but it's not Italian. But yeah, so that's interesting.
So as often happens, sometimes some of the films I enjoy the most, I actually have very little to say about. So I don't know. Do you have any more to say about House by the Cemetery specifically? That's about.
No, I think we have like a two-parter. So let's just go to the next one, which I think is bears talking about the other ones.
Yes. So from the sublime to the ridiculous, I guess. Ghost House, and this is from a little later in the decade, from 1987. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, who, if Lucio Fulci was, because all of these guys are hacks to a certain degree, in so much as they followed what was the popular trends, right? So, you know, in the 50s, they would have been directing like muscle man movies, and then westerns were a hit and they were doing westerns. So throughout the 80s, it was horror movies. Fulci, in fact, there's an entire book all about Fulci. Beyond Terror, the films of Lucio Fulci. So he's kind of has a slightly elevated status within, you know, like, so he's not quite, you know, Sergio Leone level, but neither is he Umberto Lenzi, who made Ghost House. Umberto Lenzi is kind of a few strata below Fulci again. So
right.
The fun of the fandom is kind of sorting this stuff out, I guess.
Right.
So,
but unlike Lucio Fulci, Umberto Lenzi actually used an Americanized name.
Yes,
Humphrey Humbert. Yeah. So which leads me to believe, I wonder if he's a Nabokov fan.
Same thing I was thinking as well. Like, it's such a strange, of all the names to
of all the names to pick, why would you pick something that at least is not exactly the same, but at least sort of implies a pedophile? Like,
right. And Lenzi would have had a whole bunch of different names over the years, depending on the film he's making as well. Like, I can't remember if it's Umberto Lenzi or there's another director called Bruno Mattei, who's like one rung below Umberto Lenzi again.
Okay.
I like his films; they're wonderfully trashy. But I can't remember if it was Umberto Lenzi or Bruno Mattei. When they were making action movies, they were called Dave Tough.
Dave Tough.
Yeah. So here we go again. We're back in Boston-y area, and there's a kind of a ham radio enthusiast, I guess. Well, actually, before we get to that, there's an opening sequence, isn't there, where a man going down to the basement and he finds his little girl has slit the cat's throat and is sitting there with a creepy, like a punch doll or like a clown doll thing. And the first time we hear this fucking song, man, which this thing is like it's like a, but yeah, there's a voice going, "What are you doing?" And you hear this at least a dozen.
Oh yeah. It's meant to be sort of like nursery rhyme-esque, I think. But it's just it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just that little bit too, like, it's not quite on the edge of, it's like a little bit too well pronounced or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Too many times, I think.
Yeah. And like the guy's like, "Oh, I can't understand what the person is saying. I'm gonna try to get it." I was like, I'm pretty sure they're saying, like, you know, "Who's there? Am I there?" All right. So, right.
So there's that, and there's the little kid and and then the bulb explodes. A lot of things explode, glass things explode in this film.
Where it kind of like looks like it blows up like a balloon and explodes and stuff.
Yeah, and then someone gets an axe in the head, and there's a funny mirror. Oh, the guy gets an axe in the head, and then the mother comes down. She gets a knife in the throat. Anyway,
again with her hands glued to their side, right? Yeah. So
20 years later, and there's a Boston ham radio enthusiast listening in, and on a certain frequency he hears this help, help, and all this stuff, and I think that song as well again.
Yeah.
So him and his girlfriend, somehow they figure out where the frequency is coming from, right? Videodrome style. They figure out, oh, it's coming from this place, and they don't tell the police or anything. They decide to go there and sort it out themselves, right?
Right.
Don't tell anyone. Speaking of, so I couldn't quite figure out with this film, like the benefit of post-dubbing is that you can get someone who speaks English properly to speak English dialogue, right? But in the case of this film, I couldn't, is it on set sound they're doing then? Is that why? Because some of the performances in this film are clearly, well, number one, by people who are not acting in their own language, right? I think. Primarily
the girlfriend, I believe, is German or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and almost every line delivery she gives is totally wrong, right? Like it's coming from totally the
and sometimes totally unintelligible. Like I was like, wait, what did she say?
And her interaction with her boyfriend, like I guess the tension is supposed to escalate slowly, and then but it's just they're having a normal, well, not normal, but they're having a conversation, and then suddenly one of them gets really angry, and you can't tell why because they're just angry for no reason, and it's very peculiar. So anyway, and they go and they find this they find this house where the signal seems to have come from, and there's another dude there and his sister and her boyfriend.
Yeah, he's like this guy. They've just burst into this random house, right? And they find the ham radio, and this guy comes up and goes, "Hey, what are you doing here? This is my house. I'm living here. My name is Dylan. I'm here with this and this person, and this person, and this person." Right? It's the most awkward exposition ever, right?
Yeah, Basil exposition, right? And also, it's like, "What the hell are you doing in here?" And he's angry. And then the other guy just goes, "Well, who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, well, actually, I'm here with."
And they just spills his name and everybody he's there with. There's even though he's the one has had his house intruded in, right?
Yeah.
So, but it sounded like he said, "Oh, I'm here with my girlfriend," blah, blah, blah. And when I heard it the first time, it just said like him and his girlfriend. But then suddenly there were all these other people there too, and I couldn't figure out who they were or what their relationship was, and it didn't really matter though, I guess, right? So,
well, there's another. I think the sister, I guess, is supposed to be the younger girl who I think is probably accidentally being cast a woman older than the character, right?
Right, I guess, yeah.
That's kind of very childlike and petulant. She looks a bit too old to be acting.
Yeah. The whole thing was like, wait, who are these people? How are they connected to each other? And then I thought, you know what? I don't care. It doesn't really matter.
They seem to be. They're like, yeah, we've come to this house. We're staying here.
Yeah, and there's no reason for them to be in the house. The house is like, it's basically like a haunted house with cobwebs and everything's broken and stuff. I was like, why are you staying in this house? I don't even know why they were there. They had a camper outside. I don't know. I didn't get it.
Right, which you see in they don't actually seem to be in the house. They seem to be in their RV to park it in front of a house, which they don't go into. I said, why are you there? Like,
there's no reason.
And then the one
it's important to note though. I don't know if you noticed it, and I noticed it online. It said online that it's the same house from the house by the cemetery.
Yeah.
So it's a nice connection between these two films. They're actually filmed in the same house. But so my assumption is that what is his name, Umberto Lenzi, said, "Oh, I want to film in that same house that they filmed the house by the cemetery," but he couldn't think of a reason for them to be there. So he just parked the RV next to it and then made them be in the house, right? So.
But also the one dude has obviously brought his very large, clunky, cumbersome ham radio set in the RV and set it up in the attic.
In the attic. Why in the attic? Why not in the living room? Why upstairs? Yeah. Anyway, again, doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't matter, right? So
then the little girl with the doll turns up again. Various things explored. There's some light gore scenes of people being attacked by a fan. I did like the severed head in a washing machine. That was quite cool.
Yeah.
and the furnace spits flames, and they don't think to leave. They still hang around, and then the only actor I recognize was this guy Donald O'Brien. He plays the sinister caretaker or something.
Oh yeah.
He gets blamed by the chief of police, who eventually turns up for a murder. And then the actual screams that they heard do end up happening. So they've like had some kind of precognition of events about to happen. And you hear that fucking song a million times. And then it has to do with grave robbing, I think, and a curse because of grave robbing.
Yeah.
It's nonsense, isn't it? And
yeah. It's just, I mean, it's as nonsensical as the other movie, which is that you have no idea what's happened at the end. Again, it's sort of that's why I said at the beginning I might get these mixed up a little bit in my head, because they were both. I mean, obviously, The House by the Cemetery is a little bit better, but
I would say,
yeah, but they both were like very much an Italian director with partially or entirely Italian cast that came and filmed in the same house, and they had these sort of horror images in their head, and then they just strung them together with a very loose storyline that didn't make any sense. So, I mean, they're very similar in that way. Yeah. So, to be honest, I didn't mind this one either, because I think this one again had some good ideas. I thought it had some interesting images, and some of it was really annoying and didn't make any sense. And
no more charitable to me. I don't think they had much in the way of any good ideas.
Apart I thought it was just very like, yeah, okay, there's some good stuff there, some good ideas, whatever. So but overall, again, at the end, I was like, I have no idea what happened in that movie. It was just, there was some fun stuff in it though. But I mean,
for me, it's night and day.
Really?
For me, House by the Cemetery, it has these good go set pieces. It's well put together, it's suspenseful. This has, the go isn't really that gory for a start.
No.
And they're definitely not well directed set pieces. I enjoyed it for about the first 30 minutes because it was quite laughable. So I thought, having kind of trashy fun with this. But then for me, because there wasn't enough in the way of gore, and it just kind of got a bit boring for me then. I can see how people who are obsessed with this era and this type of film might get some giggles out of it. But
I thought it was pretty funny sometimes, but I mean, it was definitely a little bit, it was less absorbing than the other one, right? So, I mean, it was certainly like, I found myself a little bit more bored at some points there, but I did think there was still some fun stuff there. You've
enjoyed it more than I expected you to. I'm quite surprised, but I would say House by the Cemetery is like, if you're interested in this spaghetti horror, I guess you'd call it, of the 80s, House by the Cemetery is an essential watch, and Ghost House is like, don't worry about it if you don't get it.
Right.
Originally, La Casa 3. So I guess, is that the House 3, right? And
do you know why they call it that? Yeah. Why don't you tell us?
So, the Evil Dead was La Casa in Italy,
right,
and then Evil Dead 2 is La Casa 2. So I guess in Italy, this becomes part of the Evil Dead.
Which despite the fact that there was an Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness, right? But they hadn't filmed it yet, I guess, right? That was early 90s, right? So
that must have been massively disappointing for the non-discriminating Italian horror. Hey, there's another new Evil Dead! Great! And they would have been,
wait, what is this stupid doll thing? What is that annoying music thing?
Why is a samurai called Humphrey Humbert? You've been reading an Apocova? Really annoying on neighbor.
Yeah, it's funny that they were allowed to do that. They were allowed to just name it after a totally other film franchise, right? So,
well, I guess they didn't call it Evil Dead 3, right? And I suppose
right,
in charge of whatever. And then La Casa. So, Ghost House had a kind of sequel, Ghost House 2 in some territories, Witchery, I believe it was called in the US.
Okay.
And that starred David Hasselhoff and Linda Blair.
Oh, wow.
Winning team.
Star power.
and that became La Casa 4, but it became Ghost House 2 in some. I'm not sure if it is. I can't remember if it's even related to Ghost House. Probably not. And then there was
Have you seen it?
Which was Beyond Darkness, which I don't remember anything about, but I've seen it.
Did you see La Casa 4?
Yeah.
And how was it?
I think it was pretty bad. I think it might have been slightly more entertaining than Ghost House because you've got Linda Blair and David Hasselhoff, so that kind of a bit more interesting. But I think it was probably just as nonsensical and shitty as this film.
Right.
Watch it, Rob.
That was directed by Fabrizio Lorenzi.
Yeah, let me know what you think of Ghost
House. There was actually a La Casa 5 as well.
Yeah, but I think that was pretty much unrelated. That was Beyond.
Right.
Which again I saw, but I don't know anything about. I saw most of these Italian things.
Right.
At some point or another, because it is one of those areas you kind of get quite addicted to. Because even when they're shitty, they're kind of amusing.
Kind of fun. Yeah. Okay. So last question: is there any particular reason why on our road trip here you've decided to specifically choose the Italian ones rather than an American movie?
No, I was looking around, so I always have a look at each territory we're going to go to, and I assumed, again, like we did wrongly with Maine, Boston being this big old kind of, with Gothic buildings and stuff. I'm guessing I assumed, there must be shitloads of horror films shot, more specifically in Boston City. I thought, not really. I was kind of surprised. So the only things I really came across were set in, and these aren't set in the city really, but at least they're Boston adjacent. And I thought, that's a nice link. Italians in Boston. So that's why, kind of by default.
I see. Okay.
But I had fun, kind of, especially House by the Cemetery. I enjoyed watching again, and I didn't mind revisiting Ghost House. Although I don't think I'll ever watch Ghost House.
Right.
So, I guess that's about our little
Boston.
So we'll be back on the road, and we'll be staying in the state of Massachusetts, though. And our next stopover will be in, I think, Cape Cod.
Cape Cod and Nantucket, kind of idea.
Is where we'll be heading next, and that'll be the second part of our mass double bill. And I ran out of time, so you will be hearing, because that's the other thing we do here, is we're also doing the state-by-state guide to 60s garage rock. You will be hearing some local to Boston, Mass 60s garage rock right about now, but I don't know what, because I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
So the names.
So I don't have to sit through it this time. Okay, good.
No, not this time run. So, but the name of the artist and the song and all that good information will be up on screen for you to follow up on if you so desire. So, until next time, this has been Septic Shock Road Trip. I've been Clive Davis. He has been
I'm Ron Scott.
And see you next time. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Said that she loved me. Yeah, she lied. She said that I'd be happy. Yeah, I cried. She said that she loved me. She said she'd be true. She said that I'd be happy, but she made me blue. I'll bet she don't like it if someone tells a lie. If it happens to her, I hope she'll cry. Yeah, she lied. Yeah, she lied. One day she'll be sorry. Just wait and see. Someone will lie to her like she lied to me. someone will lie to her like she lied to me. I'll bet she don't like it if someone tells